Welcome back to the channel, guys. I'm Travis Sylvester, and today we're going to be talking about first steps of priming the 61 Impala. Let's dive into the details of what goes into the first prime, because everything we're going to do from here on out is going to be dependent on how well you prepped the car. For example, if you didn't spend the time scuffing, prepping, chemical washing, whatever it may be, everything is going to either fail or delaminate. So this is your concrete foundation for your home. This is the ground zero. There's tons of different ways that we can do this. Every car might be a little different because of budget or what the builder has as the end expectation. To me, this car is the tier top way of doing it, which, as you guys know from the other videos, we have sent this thing to Eugene, Oregon and acid dipped it. Now let's talk about the different ways and the different scenarios that you could dissect this. We have mounted the car on the rotisserie, and we'll get into rotisserie mounting later. But today, let's talk about if you were going to do this in your garage versus have it sent out and spend the money to get everything chemically dipped. We've talked a lot about the exterior of the car, how it's bad to sandblast. Doesn't matter if it's wet or dustless blasting, it's all not good. Now, if your budget requires that you do some blasting, what I would recommend is use like an Eastwood SCT or a stripper disc, or even aircraft stripper, depending on the time that you have, to strip everything on the exterior panels. The goal here is that no sandblasting hits any of the exterior panels, whether it be from the outside or whether it be through an access hole into a roof pan. It will stretch the metal and warp it from the sand particles hitting it. It will stretch even as small as a 3/8 hole. We know this because we did a Camaro where we had everything completely prepped and ready for paint, and we were trying to eliminate how many times we take the car apart and put it back together. So everything was completely finished and ready for paint, and the whole thought was, we're gonna take it apart one time and we're gonna sandblast the interior. So the floor pans, all the structure, because that stuff's not as crucial for the warpage. All of those bends give it strength and rigidity. What had happened was there was a bunch of 3/8 holes in a 70 Camaro roof above the headliner. What happened was those sand particles went through those holes and it hit that tiny little area. And then when we went to do a final check with a light 220 block before paint, we could see the exact representation of a mirror of everywhere those sand particles had went through. That is how crucial that we know that the sand will stretch and warp the sheet metal. So the more time you take in making sure that this stuff is prepped correctly. Now in this case, because we've acid dipped, we went back through and you want to give it a tooth. This is a little bit different than if we talk about acid washing, so I'm trying to break this down for you guys. I like to do everything from the edge of the seam to the edge of the wheel well at the bottom or the pinch weld. Separate it if you have to from exterior to interior. For example, let's say you have it on a rotisserie and you want to sandblast the floor pans and make everything nice, get rid of all your rusty areas, and you're going to, by hand, strip the exterior with a stripper disc. What you could do, so you don't avoid having overspray and areas of delamination, you could blast, and it is crucial, I don't want to say it's crucial, it's going to come out a lot better if you have a rotisserie to be able to turn the car back and forth after blasting, so you can try to get all that sand out. Flip it all the way upside down, blow out down in your quarter panels, and just, I mean, sometimes it'll take 5-6 hours or all day of just turning the vehicle, blowing it out, vacuuming it to get the majority of it out. No matter what you do, the downside to sandblasting is going to be you're never going to truly get all of the sand out of the car. Now, that's why it was so good to do acid dipping with this one, is we don't have any sand to deal with at this point. They have already pressure washed all of the paint off after the dipping process. But again, if you were to blast, you could prime and seal everything up in epoxy on the interior and then come back and then strip the exterior. What that's doing is it's giving you a nice hard line. You have the seams for the pinch welds where everything is adhered really nicely to the inside. Your sandblasting is your tooth. Then you're using the stripper disc up to that seam, and you can chemical wash as well as sand. I personally like both. I like the tooth of an 80 grit scratch or a 100 grit scratch, and I like to epoxy over that. So in this case, we acid dipped and we scuffed the entire body with a DA and 80 grit. At that point, we used wax and grease remover to clean all the dirt and grime from the gloves and all the sanding off. Everything's been blown out. This is as clean as the car is going to be. And then we're going to seal and prep everything as best as possible. Everybody's going to be asking about the rocker panels inside the quarter panels. What about all those areas that are now exposed? The way I see it is, if you're blasting the car and you already have rust issues, you already have issues in there that you can't get to from blasting. With that being said, you're never going to get everything fully. You're going to try to get as best you can, and in my opinion, if you chemically dip it, they actually dip it into a rust converter where it doesn't continue to rust. You just need to then seal that up. So whatever you can do to get into those back areas, whether it be, I've heard guys using the cavity wax, I think it's from 3M, don't quote me. If you guys have a product that you like, put it in the comments below, because that's the next step that we're actually going to start doing our research in, and I think we'll do a dedicated video to what it is that we're going to use. We do want to seal up the rockers. Now you have access holes that we've pulled all the plugs out of. We're going to be sticking nozzles down in there to coat all that stuff so that way it doesn't continue to rust. Because the thing is, yes, this is a show car. It's probably not going to be driven every day. However, just washing your car where the water goes down in the window trays, we want to seal all that stuff up inside your doors, etc. Now, whether you're using a rust mort or something to seal it up, whatever you guys want to use, pick and choose, but do your research. The whole goal here is that when we're done, you have a very solid car. Everything is chemically as well as mechanically adhered. So we're going to come in and we're going to flip this car back and forth and try to get in every single area that we can get with the primer. As you are doing this, it is important to even scuff everything on the inside of the car. We have gone through every single square inch that we can possibly get to and put a tooth with 80 grit. We DA'd the exterior and we used hand sanding to get around all the little tight areas, back sides of quarter panels. I'm not really concerned with the areas that have cancer. We know we still have cancer in the window channels, the whole back section, the rockers, etc. We're going to come back. The whole goal here is that we have a time frame that we've received the car back bare metal. Now we need to get everything adhered on and sealed, and then we'll just come back, and you know you're gonna cut and make all these pieces anyway. We'll come back in with a small 3-inch stripper disc, and we will be removing the primer in those areas. The whole goal is that you don't have flash rusting. A lot of guys will try to come up with some game plan of having the car blasted, and then they do all the metal work, but the problem is, how long did your metal work take? Did it take a day? Did it take, a week? Did it take a month? You are going to want that to not flash rust on you. So that's why we're taking these extra precautions to make sure everything gets sealed up, even the floors that have holes in them, and then we're going to come through and seal everything up. What's next? We will get into talking about the primer that we like to use. We use a one primer that does everything that we want to do, which is the VP 2050. So we're going to get into how we mix that up. We're going to get into spray gun techniques and getting one nice even coat. The whole goal here is you're practicing painting the car from day one. Maybe you're going to paint the car a candy color, and it's crucial that everything gets painted in one even stroke, and you're practicing. Every car has a different shape, it may be a different technique. So let's dive into the primer. This is the VP 2050 from PPG. It is from their Vibrance collection. Yes, it is pricey, but again, with everything, you get what you pay for. This stuff is or has been known to be on national back order due to everything that you know with our supply demand. However, there is a CRE that we have, and it is CRE 321. This product is also their industrial line primer. It is like its big brother or big sister. It has the same components and makeup. So if you guys have a supply issue with the VP 2050, this stuff, in my opinion, is just as good. That's what we used when we couldn't get it. It is back, at least where we are in Southern California. But the one thing that's really good about this primer is you guys will hear that epoxy primer is not a sandable primer. It gets gummy. It just depends on what product. Now, as things are evolving, and that's why I always say the guys that are old school and don't want to look into any of the new technologies, this primer, even though it's not new, it has, it's like a dual purpose. It is a high build epoxy. So instead of going into an epoxy and then hurrying up and sealing it up with a urethane or going over it with a polyester, you are eliminating those other products. So let's just say you are typically used to doing a true epoxy only and then going over that with urethane or a polyester. Then you're going to do your body filler, and then you're going to come back in at the end with a urethane and seal it up. Now you just eliminated 4 or 5 products depending on your process, and you're using 2. You're using this primer and you're using body filler. That's it. We basically make a sandwich. You guys are going to see us seal this car up with the same primer. We're then going to let it dry. The other cool thing about this product is Colten Davidson did a very good dry test where everything is gassing off, and he actually weighed the panels. Check out his videos because he's the owner of Linear Blocks. I really like what he puts out, and I'm not saying this because it's a plug or anything like that. I truly believe in what he does. He's a great guy. We use some of the same processes, so it works hand in hand. We often talk a lot about these products and how they work, good or bad. This, if it's gassing off, is completely dry and it's done shrinking. When I say gassing off, all of the solvents, tail solvents, are leaving the body of the car within like 3 days versus some of them weeks. At that point, 3 days, you can start scuffing this stuff up and it's not going to continue to shrink. So give yourself about 3 days, scuff your car up with anything from 80 grit to 100 grit, and then you can start doing all of your body work. So the whole goal here is we're going to do metal work first. So this car is going to stay in epoxy now for a while, and then we don't have to worry about flash rusting. Once all the metal work's done, we'll come back in and we'll spot prime those areas that we fixed, and then we will scuff everything up, do our body work. Now, what gun do you need to spray VP 2050? Some of you guys may try it and go, I don't like the finish. Well, it's a lot thicker primer. Because this is a high build DTM epoxy, it has a lot more build. Typically, after we do all of our body work, I'll come in and I'll put 3 coats. Initially, we put 1 to 2 coats is enough to seal everything up, depending on how you spray. But after body work, 3 coats is quite a bit of build that you can actually block down and get rid of any of your imperfections, sand scratches, pinholes, whatever it may be. Now, when we talk about the gun, I'm just going to use the Supernova as an example. This is not the gun that we use to spray epoxy. But if you're trying to get in all those tight areas in the car and your gun and filter is holding you up, like Carey's gun, he's probably going to be struggling with this. So what we like to do, or what I like to do, and I got to get Carey the fitting is the whole reason why he's going to use that gun. You want something with a pivot or a swivel and something that can swivel this way so the gun hose and the filter is not hindering you from getting into a tight spot. Now you can pivot it and get into a tighter area. As it is, your gun or your cup is going to already get in the way. So that's good to have that set up on your filters on all your guns. What we're going to use on this is actually the Iwata. It is a 440, so it's Carey's gun. It's almost identical to a 400, but the 440 is more of a primer gun. The tip size that this particular primer likes is about a 1.8 to a 2.0 is what we like to spray with. I shoot with a 2.0, and some of you guys will say, well, that tip is too big. Again, in my opinion, if you're a good painter, you can take any gun and adjust the gun as long as you know gun setup and get it to spray that good. So if you have a bigger tip, like I use 2.0, you can choke the needle and turn your paint volume down to where you can test it on a test panel or maybe in the very beginning of priming to get that a nice finish. So let's go in the booth and we're going to talk about the different settings that you're going to use with this gun. This is your fan. So if these two horns are lateral, your fan is this way. For you guys who are new to this, you can give this a little loosen, turn it upright, tighten this back up, and now your fan is this way. I want you to think about taking a paintbrush, if you guys have painted anything in your life with a paintbrush, whether it be in your house or whatever, and tape that paintbrush right to your gun. That is a direct representation of how much paint is going to go on the car, evenly or not. So if you have the gun not perpendicular, the nozzle to the panel, and you have it where you're angled and you're shooting, you're getting more paint down below than you are up above. And again, we talk about consistency being key with all these processes. If you're doing any kind of metallics, candies, pearls at the end, start practicing this on your car now. If you're new to painting and you're going to do this in your garage, these are all good tips that you can start in the very beginning. You figure you're going to be doing this priming a lot. And I'll say a lot. Usually it's one in the beginning, and if you're really good, you can do all your body work and do one prime. Most of you guys that are starting out are going to do probably a couple primes to get things right as you learn how good your body work is going to be. Gun setup, again, if you have a bigger tip, take an area of the car or a scrap panel that's prepped the same, and as you pull back, you're going to want it to stay on the trigger. This is a dual action, so the very first part is just air, and then everything from that stop back is your paint. This is going to be your fan adjustment. So if you dial this in, it's going to become a point where you have a ton of paint hitting one area. Now what's cool about that is, what if you are inside the car and you're trying to get way up in an area that you can't get? Maybe it's around a roll cage. Adjust this in and check it, because you can get pretty far with that nozzle, but you have to kind of dust things in. And when I say dust it in, I don't mean a dry finish. I mean trigger control. Trigger control being you're not, when I say set up the gun, you want to set up the gun for your pace. Everybody's different. I shoot very different than Carey. So I like to stop and watch Carey spray, and then I'm constantly tweaking his settings to get what he likes to do. Because if you go in there and you're a fast painter versus a slow painter, you're gonna have different techniques. So set up the gun for what pace you like. The big thing I like to say in training spraying is that you do not need to rush. The only time you would rush, and I know this from personal experience, is if you're maybe you're painting outside, or you're dealing with bugs or dust, or the wind's about to kick up, you might want to start boogieing. But if you're in a garage that's got some good fans on and you don't have a lot of worry, you shouldn't have to rush. All of your paint has different hardeners that you can put in. Now this epoxy is not that way. It's just a one, I think it's just a one. No, I think it might be different hardeners for different heat temperatures. Again, I use the same thing, so I got to go back and look. However, by turning this tip, and now we know our fan is going this direction, you want to practice doing as if you had one perfect coat over the entire body. Inside, outside, again, it's practice. Maybe you're doing a candy paint job on even the inside or the floor of the car, and you have all those details. Spray and walk the panel. Now, because we're on a rotisserie and we're just prepping the car, walk only the quarter panel. You don't need to walk, obviously, the door and the fender. We don't have it here. So just try to practice doing the entire panel all the way through. And then when you come to an area that is a transition where you have all these, get these hard areas first, and then come back and do all of the big panels last. When you're done, what you'll get is a nice good coverage on all the detailed areas, and you'll have a nice finish on the outside. But when it comes to doing these, if you have a tendency of not changing this nozzle direction for the fan, you'll come in and you'll shoot, and sometimes I'll do this, and sometimes I will flip the nozzle upright and I will spray so it's more even. It depends on what kind of color you're planning to paint. If you're planning on painting a metallic or candy, I would get in the habit of turning this nozzle to try to spray everything that you do evenly. One more coat or one more pass will change the look if it's a pearl or a candy. So adjust to what the gun fits into and adjust your paint flow. So if you're testing your gun in the very beginning on that test panel and you hit it and it looks super orange peely, it's too wet, maybe you get a run, you're going to want to dial your paint back. Turn it in to limit the paint that's coming out. Do one pass at the speed that you like. For this gun, I like to shoot about 38 PSI. Some guns are differently. Now, epoxies have a tendency to break down the coatings in the gun, and even though I like this gun, I do like the Walcom. It has a Kevlar gun that doesn't eat it, and it actually sprays. I'm very impressed with Walcom. They're a very affordable gun, and it sprays nice enough that you could do everything with one gun, maybe just change the tip size. So set up your paint flow, set up the fan to what you like to get a nice even coat. Just know that if you paint one pass and it looks too dry, you either need to do one of two things. You either need to get closer so more paint is hitting the panel, or you need to dial your paint flow out to put more product on the panel. If things start looking too globby, it's an air pressure. You need to either turn up your air pressure or adjust your fan. But again, the closer you are, the faster you can move. And the farther you are, the slower you have to move. All of these things come into play. We will get into actual, maybe just a gun setup video only down in the future, but know that just want a 1.8 to 2.0 tip for that primer is what really sprays nice, and then we can get this car sealed up. So as you go through, tilt the car in either direction, come back through with a light and check everything to make sure everything is coated to the best of your abilities, and then we can go into starting the metalwork on the next phase. The other side, if you have excessive, like the whole quarter panel's damaged, we're not even going to really bother wasting material in that area because we're just going to cut it off. So just think about what your process is, what your game plan is, write it down, and just stick to those things. Don't get bogged down by, oh God, there's not a bolt in the car and I don't know what direction to go. Compartmentalize your process. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel for future updates on this build. We're going to be going through every step of the process. Check the description for any handles for Instagram. If you guys want to check out Carey, he's going to be the one priming the car and any of the products that we use. Till next week, I'll see you guys.